Welcome to One Vision. This is our episode of Daniel, Isaiah, and John.
And you're so excited.
Absolutely. You all know that I've done so much work on Daniel.
He gets as excited about Daniel as I do about Isaiah. So
and in Daniel, I could take as many episodes as she took on Isaiah. Anyway, and we could just go through so many things on Daniel. But, Come Follow Me allows us one episode on Daniel, so we will take it. And we will approach it from a little different perspective than you may have heard before. And we're just grateful to be here. And this is episode 44. And I'm Farrell.
And I'm Rhonda Pickering.
And welcome. We had such a good time this last weekend when we were meeting with many of you at the conference. And we were so grateful for the opportunity to discuss the gospel with so many of you and to share your spirit and share our love for you and just have that fellowship was just wonderful.
And how great God is. I mean, wow.
Absolutely. And anyway, I wanted to also just tell you a little bit about this episode. We were getting ready for the conference, and Rhonda gave me 100 slides to put into this presentation.
We have so much on Isaiah and Daniel and Revelation.
And the night before I was to present this at the conference, I'm presenting a similar presentation here. Anyway, the night before we presented it, I sit down to just do a final edit and trim it down because it was way too much. Anyway, and
he rewrote the whole thing.
Well, and it wasn't on purpose. In one sense, it was a total download. I felt the Spirit come upon me, and it's like he just walked me through exactly what I wanted to put in this presentation. And so I completely discarded all but one of her slides. And
so the coolest slide, okay, you know that one was mine.
Anyway, and rewrote the whole thing. So this is, well, I know this sounds crazy, but this is what the Spirit gave me to give to you. Anyway, so that being said,
let's do Daniel.
Let's just jump right in. Okay, so we're trying to combine into one vision Isaiah, Daniel, and John in this presentation. Now that's a tall order, but especially in the time frame we're talking.
It was one vision, though.
But it is one vision.
Right.
And we're going to start with Revelation. Revelation 17, verses 10 and 11. And there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So we know historically that John is referring to, because when John is talking, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Grecia are the 5 that have fallen. And the one that is Rome. And the one that came and governed that same territory is the Turkish Ottoman Empire. And the Turkish Ottoman Empire basically was wounded in 1917 in the Belfort Accord, when basically England started to allow the Jews to start to return to the Holy Land. Of course, then we know in 1948 that the United Nations gave them basically charter and gave them the land of Israel back. Just incredible fulfillment of prophecy. Now we know that the 7th that is and is not became wounded and then is healed. So we can assume that an empire around Israel will be healed. But then after that comes a little horn.
And this is
which is the 8th.
This is kind of a historical wrap up, and then also again we have history that paints the future.
Yes.
Well.
Anyway, so let's just jump into Daniel. And we're going to jump into Daniel 2:31 through 34. Thou, O king, sawest, behold, the great image, this great image whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee. In the form thereof was terrible. This image head was of fine gold. His breasts and arms were of silver, and his belly and thighs of brass. His legs of iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till thou stone was cut forth without hands, which smote the image upon its feet that were iron and clay, and break them to pieces. Now, if you go to the prophet Joseph Smith, he tells us that stone that cut forth without hands is basically the kingdom of God, and it comes forth and it grinds up all the other nations, or in essence, all nations become the kingdom, which is really a beautiful picture.
I've seen pictures where that stone is like a meteorite, shattering the statue.
Which is not the way Joseph described it.
He said it would grind slowly until it overtook, and the statue crumbled.
Yes, and in this story, you got to understand that Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and its statue doesn't come into play until Babylon. Remember that the two before Babylon were Egypt and Assyria, but the king comes in at Babylon point. And
right, because King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, is the one who's having the dream. So the gold head starts with him.
But it also, he was probably one of the biggest images of these earthly kingdoms that we have.
And could it
particularly the earthly kingdoms around Jerusalem.
Right, and could it possibly be that Babylon and the fall of Babylon is symbolic of end time prophecy as well?
Type and a shadow,
which is why the king of Babylon had that dream,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. But then when we go to chapter 4 of Daniel, we get this really strange chapter. And I've heard people poke all over the board of what this means. But I feel like this is where much of the download had started to come to me, because I was questioning, why is chapter 4 in this book? It seems so different.
Well, and I think it's important to mention here, as we're working with chapter 4, to realize that in the original, chapter 1 and chapters 7 through 12 were written in Hebrew. And the angel Gabriel says, these are for your people. These are for the Daniel's people, which would be Jerusalem. But chapters 2 through 6 were written in Aramaic. And I think that's a beautiful way that Daniel, in 3rd Nephi, the Lord gives us a chiasm to the house that he addresses to the house of Israel in chapter 20, and then in 3rd Nephi chapter 21 he addresses another magnificent chiasm to the Gentiles. And so in a way, this is Daniel's way of saying
Israel and Gentile.
These chapters are for Israel. These chapters are for the kingdoms of the world,
yes.
The Gentiles or the nations.
So let's just go into this chapter 4 a little bit. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached the heavens, and the sight thereof of all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of heaven had their habitations. Okay, if you understand that these kingdoms we talk about virtually were the kingdoms of the earth in strength kind of governed the earth through most of the times, particularly earth around Israel.
Right, the Middle East.
Okay, and it governs these areas. And so he's having this dream of this tree that's just grows to be big and powerful and beautiful. And anybody who knows the stories of Babylon and how, what's the word I'm looking for? Lavish.
Right.
It was, understands the imagery here we're talking about. And then he says, it is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong. For thy greatness is grown and reached into the heavens, and thy domination to the ends of the earth. And whereas the king saw the watcher, that's an interesting phrase, and a holy one come down from heaven and say, you down the tree and destroy it, yet the leaves and the stump and the roots thereof in the earth. Even leave the stump, he's saying. Leave the stump, make sure I get that clearly. Even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over it. So he's saying that this tree is the same as this statue of Nebuchadnezzar's previous dream, where it represents all these kingdoms down to the end of time.
It was Babylon, and then the Medes and the Persian were the silver, and then the brass
was the
Alexander the Great,
Alexander
and the Grecian Hellenization of the world.
Yep, and the Hellenization, and then the iron being Rome.
And there's 2 iron legs because
there was 2 legs of Rome, and then we end up with the feet of iron and clay. Now, when you think about all this, you got to understand this, that the Babylon was defeated by the Medes and the Persians.
Right. So each kingdom conquers, or kind of comes out of the one before.
And Alexander the Great conquers the Medes and the Persians. And then Alexander the Great is never conquered. Okay, so Alexander the Great actually,
that's fascinating.
His 4 generals come out.
Where you're going with that?
Okay,
that's cool.
The 4 generals come out of Alexander the Great. In fact, when he dies, well, let's first talk about Alexander the Great. He conquered the known world by the time he was 30, basically. This guy was an incredible general and had a lust for conquest. Well, he wanted to tame the world, so to speak.
In Daniel 7, he's got like 4 wings because and his feet don't even touch the ground because he.
That's actually Daniel 8, I believe.
Is that 8?
Okay, but anyway,
you would know better than me.
In that regard, I'm trying to say he was just an incredibly conqueror and everything, but he was not defeated. When he was dying, because he died early, when he was dying, he left. The general says, "Who's going to govern when you go?" And he says. He said to his 4 generals, the strongest rule. That's kind of a good way to start it.
Yeah, I'm like, how about Civil War? Here we go.
So, in essence, they decided themselves to each take a region, and you had one of them take the northeast and then the northwest.
So in chapter 8, he gets 4 horns.
Yeah, he gets 4 horns type. Anyway, so we have all this going on. And that sets the stage for, so there we have the Grecian control, and that sets the stage because the Roman Empire comes out of these 4 generals. Right. But not by conquest directly. They just, one of them takes the rest of them eventually.
Right.
But it is kind of a little bit, but it's still one of the lead, or the parts of it still go on. So you have these 2 bands on the tree being the Grecian Empire and the Roman Empire that have never really been conquered. They just kind of dissipated.
The brass is
and the irons.
Greece or Greco, and the iron is Rome. So we have
our culture,
Greco-Roman culture.
And that is the culture that has stayed with us all the way through all this. And then he says, let his heart be changed from a man, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. How much do you remember about 7 times? Do we have something in the last days that talks about 7 times passing over him, the kingdoms of the world? Well, the answer is yes.
So we know historically that this was 7 years that King Nebuchadnezzar kind of loses his marbles. He goes crazy and he's like a beast in the field. But I think that it's fascinating because in other scriptures, even in Daniel, we have this end time period of times and a half. And here we have a precedence being set that 7 times
is 7 years.
So
time, 2 times and half a time is 3.5 years.
Right, but this is your scriptural precedent for that interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now understand that historically, he became mad. He actually became crazy for 7 years. I mean, literally crazy. And his hair grew long, and he became just kind of like a madman in the wilderness. Really strange thing happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Well, let's go forward and kind of.
And it was a result of his pride.
Yes, definitely a result of his pride. In fact, we got into that, and I might have a slide on that later. I can't remember for sure. Then I lifted my eyes, and I saw and beheld there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, and no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could devour out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. So we have this ram, which, if you look at the chart on the left, the Babylon representing the Christians. I got this picture from the website of the Christians. This is the common interpretation of this. Okay, that in Daniel 7, we're actually in Daniel 8 here, but in Daniel 7 that the lion represents Babylon, because the image for Babylon was a lion, and Medo-Persians was a bear, and Grecia being the leopard, and with the 4 wings representing the 4 generals, and then Rome being this terrible beast that came in afterwards.
Well, and it's super important to realize that this is your 4th beast, this last beast here in Daniel 7.
Based on this interpretation in Daniel 8, we're getting kind of the ram being the Medes and Persians, with the 2 horns being the two power centers of the Medes and the Persians. Anyway, we get down there to the middle, and it says, I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west, came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had notable horns between his eyes. And he came into the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in fury and power. Now, if you study the history of Alexander the Great, you understand that he didn't touch the ground because he conquered so quickly. It's referring to the speed that he conquered the world. He was just an incredibly passionate, capable, and craving power general. He just plowed through it all. So we're going through this history, and here you have in Daniel 8, he's been given a vision of what's going to happen shortly after him, well, particularly after Babylon period, that the Medes and Persians come in, and then he's in the Medes and Persian Empire when we see Daniel and the lion's den and all that history. Anyway, so we're going through this history, and he's predicting these kingdoms to come. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power that the ram stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could be delivered, the ram, out of the hands of the goat. In essence, waxed very strong. And the goat waxed very great. In fact, we named him Alexander the Great. Okay, so he did get very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. So he died young. He died in his early 30s, right after he conquered everything.
Now, in Daniel, it actually identifies these. That's why everybody knows whose these nations are. So I'm just making
But that's actually...
That's the history.
Yes, that's in Daniel 8.
Right.
But we're... In all of the scholars have equated Daniel 8 and 7 as the same story, basically. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I just want to keep that in mind before I continue. Anyway, so the great waxed very strong, and the great horn was broken, for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. That's the 4 generals that Alexander left the kingdom to. Without a fight, by the way. He just said, you guys decide, more or less. And then out of one of the generals, which is the Seleucids, I think is right, the Seleucids came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. This little horn, historically, was Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a general that had a passion and a desire to go in and conquer Israel. He is the one who went into the temple and put in a statue of Zeus on the Holy of Holies and sacrificed a pig on the altar. So you understand that he desecrated the temple completely and totally mocked God. Okay? And this made the Maccabees brothers,
his God up to be God.
He set his God to be God.
Right.
And this is well, we're going to get there. This made the Maccabees incredibly frustrated,
Right.
and they came back. And many people talk about that in 62 weeks they kicked him back out. Okay, people have actually stated that. So here we have this story of ancient times, and we're in, and this ram comes and, or excuse me, this goat comes and hits the ram and takes over the Medes and the Persians. And this Antiochus Epiphanes, we know, is the one who desecrated the temple. Okay, now we're just going to move through Daniel 8. So we're still in the same chapter, just so you know, after all this talking of the ram and the goat.
Should we mention here that Antiochus Epiphanes is actually a type of...
I'm going to get there.
You're going to get there. Okay,
yeah. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Uri, which he called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near to where he stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, at the time of the end shall this vision be, or this vision. Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about history.
We were.
We were talking about history. Now all of a sudden, Michael's telling Gabriel to tell him, hey, this is about the future. This isn't about history. Well, it is. It's obviously history.
Who is God such as I, who can take types from the past to create the future? That's a slaughter of Isaiah 44.
Yeah, 46:10 actually.
Well, there's Isaiah 46:10 as well, but that's 44 is actually more precise about the fact that he's using types in history.
Absolutely.
To create the future.
But it's not just once he says this. He says it twice. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be at the last end of indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. All of a sudden, this whole vision about the Babylon being the lion and the he-goat, and the ram and then the he-goat, all of a sudden, he just told us this is a type of the end.
Well, he even said more than that. He said at the time appointed, the end shall be. And
by the way, I've got a whole video on that simple phrase right there.
With that title, the time appointed. But a time, the Hebrew of the time appointed is the moed, which means at one of the appointed times, these things will be fulfilled.
Okay. And then in Daniel 8:23, and in the latter time, the four who stood up. What? That means that all of a sudden he's paralleling this. He's doing exactly what he said in Isaiah. When the transgressors are come to a full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. He's equating the end time antichrist
that came from Alexander the Great, from that area. That one of those,
a little horn, like Antiochus Epiphanes, will stand up, and he'll be one that understands dark sentences, meaning he's kind of answering to the devil himself, pretty much. Excuse me. And this Antichrist character in the end time is being paralleled in history, just so you keep it straight in your head, okay?
And to me, it's really important that it says that he stands up, because there's someone else that stands up that I think you're going to talk about. I just want them to notice that he stands up.
So this story, how many remember the whole theme of what we started this year on? Well,
I do.
Yep. Isaiah 46:10, 46:9 and 10 actually. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So what we have here is he's saying the end time is going to parallel what I just told you as a type and a shadow. Wow, now it's starting to get interesting.
Yeah,
now it's starting to change flavor completely. Now let's go to Daniel 7, and let's give the type that has been given in Daniel 7, which is parallel in this same time. And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea being the peoples of the earth, diverse from one another. That means they aren't like kind of each other. The first like a lion, and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the earth, and made stand upon its feet as a man. And a man's heart was given unto it. And behold, another beast like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth, and between its teeth of it, and it say unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, and when he had on it the back of 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And then we have this 4th beast come on the scene. We had the 3.
So there was the lion, the bear, then the leopard.
But we almost have a 5th one in there, and that's the eagle wings. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yes.
And I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet of it. And it was diverse from the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
So this is your end time.
And all of a sudden, this 10 horns from Daniel, you can connect to Nebuchadnezzar's 10 toes. So
On the statue.
On the statue.
So the 4th beast in Daniel 7 here is the same as the 10 toes on the statue.
Well, yes, but yet you remember I said there's kind of 5 because you got the gold head of Nebuchadnezzar, the silver, and then you have the bronze
of Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, then Rome, but then you have the 10
iron.
toes.
Right.
Okay, the 10 toes of iron and clay kind of being in the mix. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn. Oh my goodness, all of a sudden we connected both visions with this little horn. Antiochus Epiphanes typed Antichrist, who will desecrate the temple. Okay? From whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man's, and a mouth speaking great things.
I always draw my little horn with a big mouth.
Right?
Because he speaks
So
blasphemy.
these beasts, this lion with wings of an eagle, and bear that plucked up 3, and then a leopard with 4 wings, and then this dreadful beast that comes.
The 4th beast.
Right.
With 10 horns.
And this is where those of you who have been following this a little bit, you know some of these things already, but this is where Joseph Smith sheds light on the situation. There is confusion in all things, both political and religion, and notwithstanding all the efforts that are made to bring about a union, society remains disunited. Really? Are we disunited now? Oh my goodness, are we disunited? And rightfully so, because we can't compromise with evil. And all attempts to unite it are fruitless as to attempt to unite iron and clay. He just equated this thing he's showing us to Nebuchadnezzar's dream
in
of
Daniel chapter 2. Right.
And the feet of the image are the governance of the United States.
Whoa. Say that again.
And
The feet of the image are the government of the United States. Wait a minute. So the 4th beast has the 10 horns that come up, that are out of it, and the feet have the 10 toes. And we just got told that the United States is the feet.
Is the 4th beast.
Or the 4th beast.
That's kind of scary. Other nations and kingdoms are looking up to her for an example of union, freedom, and equal rights, and therefore worship her as Daniel saw in the vision. Although they are beginning to lose confidence in her, seeing the broils and discord that rise on her political and religious horizon. He's also saying this image is characteristic of all these beastly images.
Governments and
all these previous beasts spoken of in the book of Revelation, spoken of in Daniel's previous chapters. We're equating the whole thing, and you see the picture down in the corner, which this is, according to what you said, where the meteorite comes
exactly,
in.
that's what I'm saying.
Anyway.
And Joseph Smith says, no, it rolls forth until it
So
takes...
all of a sudden, our minds are being blown, right? All of a sudden we're saying, wait a minute, we're the bad guys in this end scenario. I say what the secret combinations are doing to our government.
Right, so
is
when
the
you
bad
say
guys.
we, you're not saying the founding fathers and the land of the free. We're talking about the secret combinations that have hijacked the land of the free.
Yes.
And are using it for evil.
So let's move on, and I'm going to repeat what we did before. This is that same verse. We have a lion with eagle's wings, and then it comes along and stands on its feet as a man. Then we have a bear, then we have a leopard, and then we have this fourth dreadful beast. And out of this fourth dreadful beast comes the antichrist. So let's just do some fun comparison. A lion. Do you know that England's emblem is a lion? And you know that England is probably the only government in the world that they could say at one time the sun never sets on the English or on the British Empire. I should say Britain more than England. Okay? The British Empire was a government that the sun never set on. And what's the eagle wings? Oh, wait a minute. What came from England? What eagle came from England?
What eagle was broken off from England?
Okay. Anyway, till the wings were plucked. The Revolutionary War plucked the wings, so to speak, and lifted up from the earth and stand on the feet as a man, and man's heart was given to it. And then we have a bear. What kingdom is represented by a bear? Well, we know that England was first, but then Soviet Union became established next on the stage as a unified government. Okay? And shortly thereafter, what's the image of the leopard? Kind of like Alexander the Great. Well,
who tried to establish himself as a world power.
Who tried to establish it and moved across the world with color and speed. Hitler. Hitler became...
He was a master of the Blitz.
He was master of the Blitz. He conquered with speed, just like Alexander the Great, and then quickly disappeared, just like Alexander the Great. And then we saw in the night vision this dreadful fourth beast. Okay, so now we're starting to get a picture towards the times of as we're moving through history here. Okay, so, and I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass. We just equated this back to the tree.
This is Greco-Roman, just like the tree where the little stub trunk was left standing, but its roots were Babylon.
Its roots were Babylon, and we have the Grecian Roman culture that came out from it, which is Europe, and all of us kind of have that culture. In fact,
culture of the West, yeah.
I mean, we even use their names like romantic, names like that came out of these cultures. Anyway,
and the Hellenization of the world.
And the Hellenization, which devoured and break into pieces and stamped the residue with his feet, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other that came up, being the little horn, and before whom 3 fell. Even that horn had eyes and mouth to speak very great things, and looked was more stout than his fellows. Okay. And he rules, right here, and beheld the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. That's painful.
Well, I was just going to say that the 10 horns that rise up on this fourth beast, it says that in Revelations that they have their kingdom for 1 hour with the beast. So they have that hour, that 7-year period of tribulation, that hasn't occurred yet. So these horns are not reigning in power yet. I'm just trying to put this in context here.
Absolutely.
Just
I
a
love
little
what you're
bit.
doing.
We're saying that these horns are going to come up, and before whom three fell, but that horn hasn't come up yet, because the
Correct.
10 come first, and then the horn comes.
Exactly.
So I'm just trying to help get a little bit of a time frame here.
But this, like I said, this part I just read, and behold, the same horde made war with the saints and prevailed against them. And then it says, how long?
That's in our immediate future.
That's very close in the future. And that's painful when you realize it said saints, not Israel. I want to be clear with that.
Well,
the horn that makes war with the saints is not the making war
with Jerusalem.
This
is what First Nephi says. At this time there will be two churches only, and he defines the churches. He says the one is the church of the Lamb. This is Christianity.
Save that thought.
Oh, are we going?
Okay, I don't want you to get ahead of me too far.
All right. Well, I was equating that with your saints.
Okay, I get you.
Okay.
So when you've got that far, save the rest for a little
Okay.
later. Okay. Okay. And so he says that it prevails against the saints until the Ancient of Days comes and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So he's saying until Michael stands, which is the Ancient of Days.
Well, the Ancient of Days is Adam, and then we're told that Adam is Michael, right?
Okay, so you're doing this by association. He says that this little horn, prevails against the states until Adam stands. And judgment is given to the saints of the Most High, and time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Meaning the promised land, this promised land. Thus he saith, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be diverse from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break into pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall devour from the first, and he shall subdue 3 of the kings. So this Antichrist figure will take out 3 of these 10 horns.
Right.
Okay.
That come from the feet, which are the United States.
Now we get into Ezra's eagle. And we know that with Ezra's eagle...
Do you want to introduce Ezra's eagle just a minute?
Well, we're going to get there.
People might not know.
In pieces. We don't need to go too far because we've been here in previous episodes.
Okay.
Okay. By the way...
We hope you know what Ezra's eagle is.
Well, we're going to get there a little bit. Be aware that this is Rhonda's slide.
Oh,
she wants to know.
You told her.
Okay.
Right.
And so this big head in the middle of the eagle, just so you get this also. Well, let's just go forward and let's read it as we go. Why don't you read that, if you would?
But this head in the midst of the eagle put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all those that dwelt upon the earth with much oppression. And it had governance of the world more than all the wings or feathers, it translates it both ways, that had been. And after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings.
Okay, pause for a minute. Now, does everybody know that that the feathers, or it translates it both ways, feathers and wings, depending on the translator. Just think feathers in this instance when it says wings.
The feathers on the wings.
Yeah, the feathers on the wings, because it's part of the wing. Anyway, that these feathers are the presidents that came in with the one right before Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And why do we know that? It's because Franklin Delano, I can't even spoke. FDR. Okay, we'll do it this easy way. FDR was the only president throughout the history of the United States that was elected to 4 terms.
And Michael Rush has done fantastic work on Second Esdras, and we love the illustrations that James Prout has put here. And you can see that second feather there is twice as long as the rest of the feathers. And that's because Franklin Delano Roosevelt served twice as long
as
any of the other presidents have served.
And that's how we can line up the
that's how can we know who's who.
And we also know because of when the League of Foreign Nations,
the Council of Foreign Nations, was established,
was in the first feather.
Right.
Okay, so we know the lineup and what brings it about, and that part's all true.
What we're getting here with this eagle is that it was from the beginning of what we know today as the United Nations.
As the United Nations, okay. So the best interpretation, I think, is that these 3 eagle heads are 3 of the 10 horns.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
there's 3 of you.
Part of, right.
Yeah, part of the 10 horns, and they're probably the 3 that get put down by the little horn.
That's a little speculation,
a little
but
conjecture, but let's
move on with the actual text.
So, and the eagle head in the middle is no more, and he is taken out in whatever scenario. We just know he is taken out, and he is no more. And then, but there remain 2 heads with 2 horns, like the Lamb, speaking like a dragon, which also in like sort ruled upon the earth, and over whose that dwell therein. And I beheld, and lo, the head that was on the right side devoured it that was upon the left side.
And before you go any further here, what we have here in this illustration is we have the second beast in Revelation 13. So if you remember right, the second beast comes out of the first beast. And that you can show that with literary structures.
I would see that slightly different.
We will later.
I would see that second beast doesn't come until the little horn, and the little horn stays through the end of things.
That's actually exactly what I was saying, so
okay.
I don't think we disagree. Okay. I think we actually agree there.
We're trying to...
But in Revelation 13, he's called a beast out of the earth that comes out of the beast that originally had the whore writing all
So why don't you communicate like I communicate? No,
well, I know, right? Why don't we say exactly the same all the time?
We say it both the same and don't say the same thing. Okay, anyway. So this second head is eaten up by the first.
3 horns fall?
Yeah, I did see the 3 horns fall.
Have to watch.
That's pretty cool. Anyway, so then we have, and he spake great words against the Most High. We're talking about the same little horn that comes up. And he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times of law, and they shall be given into his hand for times, and the dividing time. We have that same phrase going on, which would be moed, moedim, and a half. And that,
or 3.5
years, 3.5 years, is a precursor to the last 3.5 years. This is the half hour of silence. And why am I saying that's the half hour of silence? Is because he wears out the saints of the Most High and thinks to change times and laws. But judgment shall sit, and he shall take his dominion and consume and destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom of the whole earth shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So this is saying after this dividing of time, we have the Adam-on-Diamond event.
Right.
Okay?
And for those that aren't familiar with the work that we've done with Daniel, the half hour of silence is in Revelation, and it is
half of the hour.
It's half of the hour of judgments, because John, who's going to refer to that hour of judgment in what we know as a 7-year period, is going to use the same imagery. He's not going to change his whole meaning when he talks about the half hour. It's just going to be half of the 7, which is 3.5.
Which is this time, right here. Spoken of in Daniel 7:25 through 27. Now I jumped to Revelation 12 here. I told you it's all one vision. And I did this because it's talking about when the kingdom is given to the saints. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him, how? by the atonement, the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimonies, and they loved not their lives unto death. So when we go into these end-time scenarios, which we are shortly on our doorstep.
By the way, that's the heart
of the book of Revelation.
Of the book of Revelation. The whole book of Revelation is chiasm within chiasm within chiasm, and that is the heart. When the kingdom of God.
So that's, I'm not trying to convey the idea that we're all going to die. But I am trying to convey the idea that just like Daniel as he went into the lion's den, and Darius...
Whether I live or whether I die, it will be to God's glory.
Yeah, and Darius actually asks him, is your God going to save you?
Yeah.
And that's when he answers the way you just said.
Right.
And he says, whether I live or whether I die, it's in God's hands. And we know he lived, so his willingness was there, but he was not required to lay down his life at that time. I'm not saying we won't or will. It's got to be willing.
Whether we do or
whether we do or don't.
I always tell the kids, whether when the Lord returns, whether we're caught up to meet him or whether we come with him from heaven.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter as long as we're with him.
Absolutely. And here we have it again. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garments was white as snow, and his hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels burning of its fire. A fiery stream came forth from before him. Thousands and thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Keep that in mind. The Ancient of Days has this scenario.
There's some word links
here. There's a ton of word links going on.
Ancient of Days, Adam, Michael,
and the thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 stood before him. Keep track of that because we're in Daniel now. But be aware where we're headed here in just a minute. And then I beheld the voice of the great words, which the book were opened. And I got ahead of myself. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. And I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words, which the horn spake. This is the little horn.
The bad horn.
The bad horn.
With the bad words.
I beheld, even till the beast was slain, his kingdom was slain, and the rest... and his body destroyed and given to burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. That means that England, Russia, and Europe,
the leopard,
are
Germany,
all going to have their lives prolonged for a time. Okay? That's what that's basically telling you. Had their lives prolonged for a season and time. And I saw the night vision, behold, one like unto the Son of Man came down in the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people and nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So they're telling us that this is all going to go on until the Ancient of the Days says, enough.
Until Michael stands. Until the kingdom is given to the saints. And this is the Adam on Diamond event. This is
absolutely.
Adam.
And you're going to see it just lays out so perfectly before we're done here. Now let's look at the Revelation version. The mighty angel has stood, which is the seventh angel, which is Michael, the archangel. And I beheld, and I heard a voice of many angels round about the throne, the beast and the elders, and the number of them was, here we have the linking to this Adam on Diamond event. And the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. That is exactly chiastically stated from the book of Daniel. It's reversed. Instead of thousands of thousands and 10,000 times 10,000, it's reversed. 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. It's fascinating how that is stated in the two different scriptures. It could be just a difference between the Hebrew and the Greek, but it's fascinating nonetheless. Saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing, and every creature in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, such as in the sea, and they are with them, I heard, saying, blessed and honor and glory and power be given unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever. And the fourth beast 4 beasts said, Amen.
These are the good beasts by the
And
throne.
24 elders fell down and worshipped him that liveth forever. Now, I find it fascinating that Joseph Smith said those 4 beasts were not like the beastly kingdoms he was referring to.
He actually said beast wasn't the right translation
Well,
at all.
it's actually a different
more
word even in the
beings
Greek.
or creatures that were at God's throne.
However, I do find it interesting that Adam-on-Diamond takes place in the midst of the 4 other beasts anyway, meaning the earth. These other beasts still are out there.
Right.
Okay, which is fascinating, just parallels. And the 24 others fell down and worshipped him forever and ever. That's really awesome.
The 24 elders being representatives of the house of Israel and the time of the church, when in the ancient temple in the tabernacle there were representatives from that all came, and they were the 24.
Well, you could go with a lot of conjecture there if you wanted to, because you could also say they were the original 12 apostles of the Lamb on both continents.
I've heard a lot of conjecture there. I
I
like to go with the temple imagery and what they were anciently.
Either way, they are 24 chieftains.
Representatives,
okay.
Right.
And it is said that the 12 apostles will be
Of the
judging
people
Israel.
of God, right.
Although they'll be judging Israel too. Revelation, now we'll go to Revelation in these things. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat upon the throne a book written, on the backside sealed with 7 seals. Now understand that this scroll, this word book is actually scroll, and it's sealed with 7 seals, is a representation of the title deed of the earth. Okay, and this title deed of the earth that is sealed with 7 seals is the 7 periods of time. And I saw the angel, strong angel, proclaim with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll, this legal deed, to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereupon. So here you have John saying nobody's worthy. And he didn't even consider the idea of who would do it. And I wept much because no man was found worthy to open and read the book, neither to look thereon.
I like to ask the kids, where was Jesus?
Yeah.
How is it that no
that
one
John didn't
even
know
considered
that he would do it?
Jesus himself would do this?
And one of the elders saith unto me, weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book, and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes. Now I personally equate the 7 horns as his power to the level of the 7th heaven, and the 7 eyes that he could see clear through all the heavens to the 7th heaven.
So
And
7 is complete
his fullness,
and absolute, and
he had a complete be able to see
power and ability to
Yep.
see, right?
which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into the earth. And it came, and he took the book out of the right hand of him that sat up on the throne, and when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which they are the prayers of the saints. And they sung a new song. I don't know that I want to tell that story. I've said enough, I better. I had a dream. And in the dream, I would assume I was in an Adam-on-Diamond type experience. And we began singing a new song. And the song was so beautiful, it spoke to my whole soul. And and it just moved me, and I began to be conscious of it all. You know how in a dream it kind of comes into consciousness, and that's usually about the time you wake up, as you start to become more conscious. And in this dream, as I became conscious, And then I became fully awake. He left me the dream, but he didn't allow me to remember the song at that time. And so I know this new song is so incredibly beautiful. And it speaks to your very soul. Thou art worthy to take the book and open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to God by the blood out of every kindred, tongue, and nation and people, or people and nation. I'm a little dyslexic sometimes. And hast made us unto God kings and priests, and we shall reign on earth. And I beheld and heard the voice of the many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was. And now we're connecting the dots. 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. This is the Adam-on-Diamond event that we're talking about here. So when you see this chart and you realize that, if you've been into our work, and I'm not going to take time to explain everything right now, and you realize that this Adam-on-Diamond event and the abomination of desolation are the reversals of each other. You remember how we talked about that he will persecute the saints until the Ancient of Days stands? And if you read in Daniel 9:27, you understand that he makes a covenant at the beginning of the 7 time frames, or the 7 years, and he affirms the covenant for 1209. Well, he does for 7 years. He confirms the covenant for 7 years, and that starts the count of the 1290 days.
That's your blue part right there in the 7-year period right there, and then you can see that Adam-on-Diamond is in the middle right there.
Yeah, and it says in Daniel 9:27 that in the midst of the week he will betray the covenant. And the betrayal of the covenant, he betrays it with the abomination of desolation, which is equated to Antiochus Epiphanes' desecration of the temple. He absolutely desecrates the temple and betrays the covenant he made at the midpoint at 1290 days from the beginning. And we have the abomination of desolation. And the little horn shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease. The daily sacrifice, by the way, we're talking about here, that started 2,300 days before he causes it to cease. For the overspreading of abomination he shall make it desolate, even until the consumption, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. He's saying this is the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet when Christ was speaking to his brethren on the Mount of Olivet. And he's telling this exactly how this is going to go down. And it is typed and shadowed by Antiochus Epiphanes in Daniel 8 and 9.
And in Isaiah, it's typed and shadowed by the one that stands on and sits on the throne of God and declares himself to be God. And it's in the New Testament and Thessalonians as well. But this is what we're talking about. And notice...
And that's why we call it one vision.
Right. And notice that this is in the midst of the week.
In the middle of...
So what we're seeing here is that this Antichrist figure stands at the same time as Adam stands.
Well, we're about to show that.
We're going to show it
get ahead
more
of ourselves
fully
too much.
here.
Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, this Antichrist. And by him the daily sacrifice is taken away. So we know who's doing it now. It is this little horn. And by him, the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the place of his sanctuary is cast down. Do you notice it says the place of his sanctuary? That's an interesting concept. He probably will be what did it say in Revelation? A Jew that is not a Jew.
It says in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, it talks about Jews who say they're Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. And I was having a little brain moment.
So he hijacks the holy people too.
He hijacks the sanctuary. Yeah, he's hijacking it all. Then I heard one saint speaking, and the other saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, and then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. This begins to create a framework that's almost bulletproof when you understand all the ingredients.
All these numbers and
all
how
these
they
numbers
fit
and the way they fit
on a
together.
calendar.
It's like a fitting together puzzle. Once you get it together, it's the only way it can go. And
that would be in the book.
Yeah, that would be in the book.
The whole purpose of the book is to
show you the framework.
Explain that all,
Yep.
and so you don't have to get it here in this presentation.
Yeah, don't think you got to get this all, because we do have other tools, or you can watch this multiple times if you want. But we also have our new book, and we'll talk about that at the end. Then he said unto me, Fear not, Daniel, from the first day that thou didst set thy heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before God. By the way, he was fasting 21 days. Well, he started fasting 21 days before this vision.
How many
And
of
the
us
words
would
I know,
fast
right?
for 21 days until we got our answer?
Right? Thy words were heard, and I have come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 20 days. He's saying that the power behind the power of these kingdoms withstood me, Gabriel, for 21 days. Wow. And then he goes on to say, And I remained with the king of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. And then a few verses later he says, But I will show thee that which was noted in the scripture of truth, that there is none that holdeth with me things except for Michael your prince. And I actually, there it is. And lo, Michael the chief prince came to me, and that's how he delivered Gabriel from the prince of Persia, which is the power behind, the spirits behind the power.
Yeah, and the prince of Persia is in this case very much like we saw in Ezekiel when he's talking about Gog as a type of all of these
The prince of the world.
world rulers that
I will
are
rule this
grasping
earth
for
with
power, right?
blood and horror.
And
more or
Gog
less,
is
yeah.
the ultimate prince of Persia, prince of Tyre. There's many symbolic representations
Right.
of this antichrist type figure.
Going on, we're going to jump into chapter 11 now, and we're going to show you this abomination of desolation taking place. And it says right here, starting in verse 41, And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, meaning at the Antichrist. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. And he shall enter into the glorious land, meaning Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief children of Ammon. In other words, for some reason he's not interested. They're too poor, I guess. And shall stretch forth his hand upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasuries of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to take away many. And he, the little horn, shall plant his tabernacle of his palace between the seas, in the glorious holy mountain. There's our Antiochus Epiphanes type and shadow being fulfilled. He will plant his palace on Temple Mount.
Between the
seas. The Sea of Galilee, the Mediterranean, and the Dead Sea. Jerusalem being in the middle. Glorious mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. And at the time he declares himself God in the Holy of Holies, and desecrates that temple. The great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And at that time Michael shall stand, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people.
Okay, pause for just a second because you got to pay attention to the words. Michael stands up.
Like the little
exact
horn.
Same words for that the little horn
stands
did
up. So they are
time.
in contrary. They are
they're contrasting each other.
And the great prince which standeth for the...
Kind of because the little horn says, I'm God, and Michael says, no, you're not.
Right. And the great prince which standeth for the children of the people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one of them found written in the book. Now, he just told us that at that time, everybody who's on board shall be delivered. At the Adam-on-Diamond time. If you correlate that with D&C 88, you understand that in D&C 88, there is a resurrection catching up event there that the Christians would call the rapture. But it just said everyone that is found written in the book. But then it goes on to confirm the same things D&C 88 said. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and to contempt. But then he goes on to say, but thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal up the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. That's actually the verse at the front of our book that tells you that the time of the end is here, basically.
So I was just going to have you tell him that, you keep referring to D&C 88. That's a big section. You might want to point him to the verse that talks about that resurrection, the same one there.
I'm going to guess it's 94 through 97.
It's about 94.
Yeah, 94 is through 97.
Right there.
It's not perfect in this.
And we know that this lines up, too, because there in D&C 88, it talks about the half hour of silence.
Right at the end of the half hour of silence.
When Michael stands. Bam, right there. It's all there. It all links together.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So when you look at this abomination and desolation, you know that it takes place in the midpoint of this seven times.
Or hour of judgment in Revelation.
Many names you could give it.
It's all one vision.
It's all one vision. Okay? But then we have this last 3.5 years.
That's bad.
After Adam-on-Diamond.
That's bad news.
Okay? Well, why is there 3.5 years later? Michael just said, oh, you're not God, I'll show you. Well, because then God starts to preach his sermons, for one thing. Anymore, it's not necessary for man to preach the sermons because God's preaching the sermons, and we have the judgments of the book of Revelation starting to just go.
And Zion, the New Jerusalem, has been established as a place of safety, and the 144,000 are empowered to rescue.
And those that fight against
that are
God,
written in the book of life,
who kind of have the same spirit of the Antichrist, shake their fist at God, and basically we have this big showdown time, which I'm about to show you in Scripture.
The little horn, all hell literally is being unleashed here.
Absolutely.
And the angels of heaven are being sent forth as well.
So we have, and one said to the man clothed in linen, by the way, the one who said to the man clothed in linen is Gabriel talking to Michael, which was upon the waters of the river. How long, so Gabriel's asking Michael, how long shall it be the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held his right hand and his left hand under heaven, and share by him that liveth forever and ever, that shall be at times and half a time. Now, we went with that earlier, where we showed you that times referred to a year. So 1 time is 1, times is 2 more, and a half. So that's 3.5 years. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all things shall be fulfilled.
And so this is when Michael's standing, he's saying that there is still times and a half. There's 3.5.
So there's 3.5 years left, and there we have the time frame. So now let's just go back to where we began. Let's go back to this Daniel vision, chapter 4. What's going on here?
It's a Nebuchadnezzar dream.
It's his second dream about the tree. Let his heart be changed from a man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. So this period of time we're talking about is this 7 years of tribulation, this 7 years that we're talking about. And this beast's heart be given to him is basically saying this tree that was great and magnificent, all these kingdoms, all these 7 beastly kingdoms, referred to as beasts, absolutely go crazy. It's all the kingdoms of the earth have gone nuts, and they are just completely out of control.
Because of their pride.
Because of their pride and because of all those things we're talking here. And how do we know that? Well, we're going to get right here just in a minute, but let's pick up Apocalypse Ezra so that you know what we're talking about is true. But there will be an interval, as it were, a week of years, and this is the order of my judgment that I made only to you. So this week of years is 7 years. So after this 7 years, after this beast has been crazy, do you realize Nebuchadnezzar went crazy for 7 years, and he's the type of this tree, these kingdoms of the earth. But then we have this miraculous thing happen after the 7. Back to Daniel chapter 4, verse 34, where we began. And at the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High. And I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. The kingdoms, Nebuchadnezzar was healed, and the kingdoms of the earth get healed. And Nebuchadnezzar,
because of this time of judgment.
Yeah. So they get healed. They come back to sanity. And the earth is healed by the little stone cut forth without hands that gobbles up the whole earth.
And I praised and honored him that lived forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom from generation to generation.
And then the next verse. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment. And those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So Nebuchadnezzar, being a representation of the earth, of all the kingdoms of the earth in their pride and went crazy. He's healed. He regains his sanity. The earth is healed, and we go into the celestial realm.
The terrestrial.
Yeah, the terrestrial realm. I'm sorry.
And the millennial.
And the millennial day. One vision, Daniel, Isaiah, and John. And the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Presented by Farrell and Rhonda. God bless you. Don't forget, this is episode 44, but don't forget, we go into the structure of all these numbers and everything in the story of understanding Daniel's timeline, prophecy unveiled. Support us on our website, and till next time, God bless.